Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to this webinar. We thank you for being here with us. I'm Janine Horn, the CEO of the Dragonfly Institute, a financial advocacy, literacy, and empowerment change agent, as well as a board member of the National Shelter Movement of South Africa. It's an honor for me to be hosting this webinar, Economic Empowerment for GBV Survivors. And we have two esteemed expert panelists presenting this morning, and we look forward to their insights. Please engage with us, post your questions in the chat, and we'll be taking some questions after our first presenter. Let me introduce our presenters here this morning. So Bernadine Bacher, she's an advocate of the High Court of South Africa and has been involved in protecting women and children's rights throughout her career as an advocate, both in private practice and as a family advocate. She has served as the senior family advocate for the Cape Peninsula of South Africa for many years and was appointed as the director of the SBCWC in January 2018. That's a mouthful. She has served on the executive committee for the National Shelter Movement and is an erstwhile chairperson of the Western Cape Women's Shelter Movement. She is head of advocacy GBV for the Seroptimus International South Africa and serves as president Seroptimus International Cape of Good Hope. Thank you for being here with us, Bernadine. I just want to introduce Rose as well, our second expert panelist. Rose Bowler is a senior social worker at Sahara Shelter. Rose, I hope I pronounced your surname correctly, and has a bachelor's of social work from UNISA. So this theme of economic empowerment for GBV survivors in South Africa provides survivors, us as advocates in the movement, a forward-looking perspective, and helps us to begin to focus on practical solutions to support survivors and better empower them economically with aspects like financial literacy and many more that plays a key role. We'll unpack this this morning with our experts. And furthermore, if we think of the 2030 global sustainability goals, one of which is gender equality, we need to begin to understand the barriers to economic empowerment and what are the key aspects in getting us there. Barriers such as culture, such as financial literacy, such as support systems and partnership, employment, entrepreneurship, education, financial literacy, etc. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Bernadine, our first presenter. Most importantly, please engage with us on the chat. And after Bernadine's done presenting, we will have a time for Q&A, and thereafter we will go to Rose. Bernadine, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm battling with my PowerPoint. Can everybody see it properly now?
Not yet.
Oh, okay, let's go back.
It looks like we're moving, Bernadine. There we go.
Okay, is it sharing properly though that you can see it as a slideshow? Because that's been my...
Not yet. Just press the little slideshow button at the bottom.
No, it's not giving me those rights. Okay. Having one of those mornings.
You do have co-hosting rights, so you are able to share.
Is it now better, Janine? It's showing it on my side. I don't know why.
Ronnie, would you like me to share and then you just advise when I change screen?
Yes, I think so, sweetheart. Otherwise, I'm going to be going backwards and forwards. I can see it properly on my side, but you can't see it. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, let me click on while Mel is working on that. So good morning, everybody. I have been asked to talk to you about women's economic empowerment today. As we go through the morning, I'll be revising some of the theory with you and give you some examples of women's economic empowerment programs, particularly the one that we have instituted at the Sakli Bartman Center. So let me start off with going through with you with about the things that we know. Why should shelters be prioritizing economic empowerment? We know that according to the United Nations, gender-based violence is the most systematic and widespread human rights violation globally. We also know that in 2015, the World Health Organization identified 6 causes and risk factors for gender-based violence, which included traditional gender norms, supporting male superiority and entitlement, unemployment and gender inequality. And we also know that poverty is a risk factor associated with GBV, and that it also intersects with and reinforces gender inequality. So what is economic empowerment? We hear so often about economic empowerment and how we should be prioritizing it in shelters. We know that it is forms part of Pillar 5 of the NSMSA. Economic empowerment includes the following. It includes an increase in financial literacy, which is the knowledge and skills which enable us to make sound financial decisions and obtain resources. It is also an improvement in economic self-efficacy, which is the belief that one has the resources, options, and confidence to be successful. So it's really a self-belief part of economic empowerment, economic self-efficacy. And economic empowerment is also an improvement in economic self-sufficiency, which is the way that we traditionally understand economic empowerment. Now, what does economic empowerment currently look like in South Africa? What does women's economic empowerment particularly look like in South Africa at the moment? So in August 2024, Stats South Africa released the latest unemployment figures, which show an increase in joblessness as women continue to grapple with high unemployment and inequality. And we are all aware of really the ongoing challenge that we have at shelters getting women employment post-shelter. And the statistics that have just come out are saying to us that joblessness across the board, not only with women, but across the board is increasing. Unemployment increased to 33.5% during the second quarter from 32.9% in the previous quarter. So let's go back to what we do know. Statistics show that women in South Africa continue to shoulder a disproportionate burden of unemployment, underemployment, and low economic force participation compared to men. Over the decade 2014 to 2024, gender disparity in unemployment rates has persisted across all education levels. And women, irrespective of their educational background, consistently face higher unemployment rates compared to men. The more alarming part of that, what came out in the latest statistics, shows that the most significant rises in unemployment were amongst women with tertiary qualifications, where the unemployment rate jumped from 15.1% in quarter 2 2014 to 26.9% in quarter 2 2024, which is a rise in 11.8 percentage points. And the unemployment rates with those with matriculation certificate increased from 28.8% to 39.5%, which is a rise of 10.7 percentage points in unemployment of women that have a matriculation. So what we're seeing when we have a look at women that walk into the shelter, and I can only speak about the Sakli Bartman Center, probably 70% of the women that come into the shelter do not have a matriculation qualification and or a tertiary qualification, tertiary education qualification. Now, what the stats are showing us is that notwithstanding the fact that women have a tertiary education qualification or matriculation, unemployment continues to rise for them. So what this says for us is what we've got to do at shelters to make sure that post-shelter we're able to help women to get employment in order to breach the gender gap. Now, you might ask, why should we be prioritizing women's economic empowerment in shelters? Now, women's economic empowerment should be prioritized in shelters precisely for the reason that it can prevent gender-based violence in the following ways. Women's economic empowerment increases women's household bargaining power, including the ability to negotiate household power relations. It obviously decreases household poverty. At the community level, it contributes to shifts in attitudes, gender relations of power, and a reduction of the impunity surrounding domestic violence. And I'll speak to this a little bit later, how if one is looking to change community values when it comes to gender-based violence, the patriarchy and power imbalances, you can't do it without ensuring that you are looking to change women's economic disempowerment. Women's economic empowerment also lessens financial dependency on an abusive partner and provides women with means to acquire their own home and set up a life post-shelter. And obviously, it creates easier access to lawyers and legal aid. Mel, are you struggling? Okay, there you are, much better. So women's economic empowerment increases women's financial independence and knowledge about finances, including how to manage and budget. And this financial literacy makes it less likely for them to end up in economically abusive relationships. Conversely, and it's really important to remember this as part of your safety planning when women leave shelters, as women become more economically secure, GBV and DV, domestic violence, may actually increase, especially when men use violence as a way to control women's income or resources, or to express dissatisfaction about shifting household roles, and or when there is anger or backlash at the community level among men in response to women's increasing market activity or economic status. So not only do we have to be painfully aware that we cannot really be talking to preventing gender-based violence post-shelter or keeping our women safe when they're going when they're leaving shelters. We have to be aware that increasing their economic empowerment might actually have a backlash amongst men and cause them to be further unsafe. So it has become increasingly clear that GBV and women's economic empowerment are interlinked and dependent, and thus should be prioritized in shelters. To create an environment where the health, rights, and well-being of women can thrive, it is essential to develop policies, programs, and resources that address the complexities that exist between economic empowerment and GBV. GBV creates barriers to women's economic empowerment, preventing them from realizing their full economic potential because it limits their access to resources and circumstances that drive their economic growth. All things that we understand and all things that we are all clearly aware of. But I think where we often sit in challenging situations in shelters is, how do we go about devising an economic empowerment program that really speaks to real economic empowerment? So as we'll see shortly, I'm going to go through a couple of the case studies in South Africa. The answer to reducing gender-based violence does not lie in simply improving conditions for women's economic empowerment through policy or programming initiatives. If it did, many of the policy changes that we've seen at government level, including our community education programs, would have seen an increase in women's economic empowerment. Stats are showing us that something very different is happening on the ground. And that is because we need a more comprehensive approach as to how we're dealing with economic empowerment. We need an approach that includes looking beyond direct economic impacts and addressing broader structural inequalities, including breaking down harmful patriarchal norms. We have to be having a look at prioritizing shifting power dynamics in order to enable women to make direct decisions that advance their well-being and position in society. Now, I wanted to have a look at some of the cases. There has been some really good work done in women's economic empowerment in South Africa. And one of the case studies that was implemented in rural South Africa was the intervention with microfinance for AIDS and gender equality, the IMAGE trial, which has been very successful in addressing gender-based violence through women's economic empowerment. So women in the IMAGE study accessed microfinance and received gender training sessions and support around community mobilization. And what this looked like is, in addition to traditional ways of empowering women economically, the IMAGE study actually looked at training women on gender, on training women on gender-based violence, on training women on the harmful norms and behaviors that underpin the patriarchy, in addition to looking at economically empowering them through microfinance. And that study found that 2 years after the launch of the study, that women who had been part of the intervention experienced 55% less intimate partner violence in the previous year than women who had not participated in the intervention. And that there was no impact on intimate partner violence for women who had only received microfinance. So this just reinforces the importance of combining economic empowerment with gender empowerment. If we're really not speaking to both of them, we're not really going to give the women in our shelters the best shot at actually being fully empowered once they leave our shelters. So the next slide will just speak to different ways that one can combine economic empowerment with gender-based violence prevention work. So you can see there that this is one study. It was a 2-year pilot, and that worked with 15 monthly sessions. Those sessions covered both economic empowerment and violence prevention. And on the economic empowerment level, things like business development, production skills, marketing, and financial management were dealt with. But in combination with that, on the gender-based violence prevention work, things like nonviolent communications, shared decision-making, healthy parenting, and promoting violence-free communities was dealt with. And this had the effect of actually reducing gender-based violence across the board. Next slide, please. So one of the most important things when one is thinking about developing an economic empowerment program is making sure that you're tailoring it for the community that you're serving. And we'll see now by having a look at one of the programs that was actually developed in Zimbabwe, that if you fail to do that, you actually stand at a greater likelihood of actually not empowering women to either prevent gender-based violence or to be fully economically supported. So the IMAGE model, which I've just spoken to, has been widely replicated in South Africa and other countries, and with various adaptations that really speak to the communities that they're serving. Those adaptations have had to be put into place in order to serve the communities that were rolling out the interventions. So in the Shaping Adolescence in Zimbabwe initiative, the economic empowerment program initially only rolled out to adapt a similar approach to the IMAGE project. So they looked at microfinancing alongside gender training for adolescent girls. However, when they rolled it out to look exactly like the IMAGE program, what happened was the pilot study found poor repayment rates and generally weak outcomes. So SHAS had to develop a program that really spoke to their particular community that they were serving. And what they did is they started including vocational training, like hairdressing or secretarial skills, in the economic empowerment, and they also included the micro grants. What they saw then is that after a long time of actually putting those in place, the evaluation showed that 2 years later, adolescent girls who had received the intervention experienced less sexual and/or physical violence. So SHAS is showing us that you can't take a cookie cutter approach to developing a economic empowerment program as a shelter, because you really need to be speaking to the women that are in your shelter, to their needs directly, but you also need to be seeing what are the community needs as they stand in the community that you're serving, and obviously the community that the women would be leaving to go back to once they've left the shelter. So now I'm going to show you a little bit of what we've done in terms of economic empowerment at the Saki Bartman Center. So at the Saki Bartman Center, we have an economic empowerment program that comprises four different programs. We have accredited job skills training. We have entrepreneurial training. We do job placement through an app called JobJack, and we do IT skills training. So every woman that comes through the doors at Saki Bartman Center and stays in the shelter would get accredited job skills training, and she would get IT skills training. Now, obviously, these are women that are still seeking to be employed. We sometimes get women that are already in employment, and it wouldn't be as necessary for them to have something like IT skills training because they might have already gone through it. But they are offered, all women in the shelter are offered these four programs. So what the program does is to make sure that once the woman leaves the shelter, she's in the most advantageous place to actually find employment. One of our biggest challenges. So the job placement app is through JobJack is a very interesting concept. JobJack offers is an application that offers entry-level jobs to women that don't necessarily have to have a matric certificate. In essence, what a woman would do is she would go into the app and make a profile. Her profile would include her skills as well as her educational qualifications. Then she loads that profile up onto the app. JobJack, the app itself, would then notify her when a job becomes available that matches her qualifications and or her skill set. With the push of a button, she literally would push a button that says apply. Her curriculum, her CV would go out off to the employer. Not only is it a really easy way to look at entry-level job placement for women, but over and above that, the app itself offers training on job skills, on different levels of interviewing for a job, how one goes about making oneself ready for placement in employment. So there's a number of, there's a huge part of the program that actually speaks to training women to be more job ready. IT skills training at the Saki Bartman Center would cover things from very entry-level things like how to work on the internet, as well as how to work with email, all the way to Excel spreadsheets, etc., etc. And at the moment, we're running our accredited job skills training is looking at placing women as home-based carers. And we do home-based care 1, 2, 3, and 4, just to give women a better chance of actually being placed in the formal sector. Next slide, please, Mel. I wanted to speak to you about the entrepreneurial program, because I think really this is how we're going to make sure that women that leave the shelters aren't subjected to the vagaries of the job market once they have left. We all are aware of the economic situation in South Africa and how that's impacting on everybody across the board, but it's obviously having a very huge impact, as we seen from the stats, on the ability to actually find employment. And at the Saki Bartman Center, what we did is we realized that if we didn't put an entrepreneurial program in place that really would teach a woman skills that they could employ anywhere and not be dependent on the job market, we would actually be failing them. So what we have done, we've set in place this entrepreneurial program that really speaks to survivors manufacturing products which are sold to the private sector. So this is in partnership with the private sector. The survivors receive training, and as they are producing these products, they are paid a stipend per product. So while they're with us, they are building up a nest egg. They are managing to put money aside. Part and parcel of putting that money aside is talking to giving them financial literacy training. And over and above that, it's an income generating program for the center, in that it's a very small percentage of the cost comes towards our costs at the center. So we really are generating income while we're running these programs for women. And I just also wanted to hear to touch on what it really means on a psychological level for women survivors at the center to actually be going through the program. So I'm going to give you some feedback from survivors over the last 3 months, what they've said about their entrepreneurial program. So one of the survivors said that I grew so fast in a short space of time at Saki Bartman. I have been sewing for 3 weeks and I can already make 14 bags a day. My confidence grew and I believe and have faith that I can do anything. Next slide, please. Another survivor said, I started in the sewing hub knowing nothing. I can now work on an overlock, a plain machine, and even cut garments. I was even taught to lay up the fabric and cut many bags at a time. I grew here personally and professionally. Third survivor says, when I started in the sewing hub, I could not sew. I'm proud of myself today. I can make 30 to 40 bags a day. I have learned a lot. Next slide, please. Final survivor said, I'd never thought that working on a sewing machine could teach a person so much skills. For example, keeping your posture, having patience, having a goal for the month, and work very hard to accomplish it. And most important, to create something which you can look at and be proud of. So really, when one is looking at instituting or developing an economic empowerment plan at your shelter, you really need to start evaluating what it is that your survivors themselves are in need of. And then really starting from there. What is the job market in your environment saying is necessary skills that are needed, and how do you go about creating a program that really speaks to the needs of survivors on the ground? Next slide, please, Mel. So you may wonder how to go about devising an economic empowerment program in your shelter. What we know so far is that effective interventions need to ensure that they focus on transforming gender norms and relationships. That includes not only changing women's economic empowerment, but also increasing their voice and autonomy. We also need to ensure that there is adequate exposure to messages of change. One-off sessions are unlikely to be effective in reducing violence. And you must also strategically engage men and boys in change. And this is really to support women's economic empowerment, including training on positive aspects of masculinity and building on men's empathy to effect wider gender transformative change. So how we do this at the Saki Bartman Center, this is done both through our Children in the Community program and through our partnership with other organizations in the community. We partner with the Callis Foundation on their BBB program that really speaks to supporting boys through training them on healthy masculinity, making sure that they have mentors, making sure that they feel supported when they're going, particularly through adolescence, speaking to them about what the impact of gender-based violence and domestic violence is on women, what the impact is on families, what it is on the broader community, and what it is on the South African society as a whole. So really what one needs to do is when you are installing your economic empowerment program, you need to start working with your communities from the ground up and really beginning to understand within your communities, where do the needs lie when it comes to empowering women. It might well be that a sewing hub might not work in your shelter, and there might be a need for another form of entrepreneurial program. And that's really when you start speaking to communities to see where the needs are, where you can fill those needs and how you can best go about doing that you're really beginning to see, okay, I won't be able to do it this way, let's start looking at something else. And how we also do that at the Saki Bartman Center, we make sure that we evaluate with our clients once a month at least to see how they're experiencing the programs at the center and where their needs are lying. And this is just something that is done in a what we call a house meeting. There's a questionnaire that sets out a number of questions that speak to their experience of the shelter, but also to the experience of where their needs still lie and how we can actually go about meeting those needs. Next slide, please, Mel. So How one can go about meeting those needs is really to make sure that you're speaking to all the role players that are in the room. So I've already spoken to the need to speak to men and boys with regards to gender prevention, making sure that there's buy-in, addressing potential resistance or backlash to programs that really speak to women's economic empowerment. Next slide, please, Mel. There's other role players that also need to be consulted, and these all obviously depend on the community that you're serving. You might find that one is more prominent in your community, and rather than others. So you might need to consult elders and community leaders, the youth, development practitioners that work out of your community. You might also need to consult with various government departments and other service providers that might be able to give you insight into how to develop a program that really speaks to the needs of survivors on the ground, but also how to develop a program that will find a place within the community that you're serving. So in conclusion, women's economic empowerment is a central component of gender equality, justice, non-discrimination, and human rights. Women's economic dependency on men not only undermines their social and political autonomy and human rights, but also places them at risk of gender-based violence. As interrelated components of gender inequality, GBV and the inhibition of women's economic empowerment share many of the same drivers, and we've seen this again and again and again. And some economic interventions with specific gender components have been proven to reduce gender-based violence. And the Image project is a very, very good example of that, which you may look at installing with community adaptations. So in short, gender-based violence and women's economic empowerment are complex, interconnected issues. Neglecting a holistic approach and risk disempowering women and increasing vulnerability to gender-based violence and discrimination. Conversely, a comprehensive approach aimed at transferring gender norms creates an environment for women to thrive. Thank you very much. I do apologize for the pandemonium with the slideshow. I take full responsibility for it. I just couldn't get it to work properly. Thank you, Janine.
Thank you, Bernadine. Thank you for your insights, and most importantly for highlighting that you've made at the center. I want to ask you two things. One, there's a question from Bernard, but before I get there, the Momentum Household UNISA Index mentions a concept called financially knowledgeable persons, and it speaks of the knowledge base that we all have as income earning adults in South Africa. So the index reflects the truth that you have showed here, that us as women own less, earn less, are more marginalized, are more oppressed financially. And so there's a fundamental issue that you highlight towards the end here. And it's this ongoing gender pay gap, it's this ongoing skills gap, it's this ongoing financial literacy gap, it's this ongoing education gap. And so my question to you is, how can we better engage corporate SA, key stakeholders, local, international foundation, government to better support, better educate, better encourage, better engage, to grow and improve this financially knowledgeable inaccuracy, massive difference, to reduce that difference of what we earn, what we own, how we are marginalized, how we are oppressed, how we are victims of financial and economic abuse as women in South Africa. Surely there must be an engagement that we start saying at a top-down level, there's more work to be done to impact this women's economic empowerment better.
Thank you, Janine. It's a very good question. And yes, absolutely everything that you've said is what we are day-to-day faced with when we work within the gender-based violence sector. So let me unpack that. there's no magic bullet. You really need to sit down and take a holistic approach and say, okay, what does addressing GBV, preventing GBV, women's economic empowerment, and education of not only our women in the shelters, but also education of girls and boys. How do we go about achieving that in a holistic way that is reasonable? And I think that that's where the rub lies. Quite often policymakers come up with these incredible, I'm going to put my video on for a change. They come up with these incredible ways that one can go about effecting change at societal level, and these really do not speak to, number one, what the needs of survivors are on the ground, but also they pitched at such a level that they really aren't making the small changes that make the big changes. So it's about saying, okay, how do I address what is happening with women in my shelter? Do I have a keen understanding of what her challenges are currently? Do I have a keen understanding of what the challenges are post-shelter? And then unpacking those and saying, okay, how do I address these on so many levels? What are the challenges that my community are faced with? And each community's challenges are going to be slightly different. And how, as a center that speaks to gender equality, how do you start supporting your community? So, for instance, what we do at the Saki Bartman Center, that's part of our empowerment program, is we have what we call a gender-based violence hub. That gender-based violence hub is key government departments, primarily SAPS Manenberg, the local DSD office, and CBOs that work in the area like Rape Crisis, the Callis Foundation, Saki Bartman, and others. And we meet up monthly, and we really speak to, okay, what is the needs in the community this month. So it might be that one of the high schools has had a spate of sexual abuse incidences, and they're asking for somebody to come run a program on consent. And then what we do is we parcel out the work between us, finding out who is more readily the expert in the work that needs to be done. But also, so we start working on a community level of actually dismantling dismantling patriarchy and supporting women. Part and parcel of that work is also saying, okay, the gender gap is so incredible when it comes to women trying to access employment. But that really starts from the moment that they leave school, whether they leave school with a matriculation certificate or not. So we support women to actually be able to enter the job market with confidence. So what we are working on at the moment is with girls that are in the center that are adolescents. So hooking them up, I can see my internet connection is unstable. I do apologize. But really, what it is hooking them up with mentors in the community that might be able to help them with whatever is presenting to them as a challenge. And this is it's a program that really just calls in experts to actually help them through the challenge that's presenting themselves presenting at the time. So really what you need to do is holistically say, okay, these are the challenges that are facing women. It is that they don't have a job. It is that they don't have a set of skills. It is that they're not financially literate. It is that they need to get their matriculation certificate. And step by step building a program that really speaks to all of that and finding out where she can fit into that program. You know, JobJack was an absolute outlier. They came in, we'd found it so difficult to get women employment because most often they don't have matriculation certificates. And they came in and they said, okay, well, our program actually speaks to women that have standard grades 10, 11, and 12. So you could actually use it. So it's finding out also what's available around you, what can be implemented. It's having a keen understanding what not only what the challenges are, but also what the resources are that are available to you. And then it's kind of like eating an elephant, you know, bit by bit. That's the only way you can do it. There's no magic bullet. There's no magic transformation. You really need to just understand what the needs are and slowly but surely craft a response to them.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Bernardine. Bernard's asking the following. He says there's been a lot of noise regarding GBV in South Africa and other African countries. Has the noise managed to reduce GBV in communities? What is missing? As a journalist, it becomes very hard to speak to victims of GBV, even through victim empowerment organizations. Yet their voice is really important stories that we write as journalists. And I guess the noise now, women's economic empowerment, adding to his question, has that noise managed to reduce? Has it managed to impact? That's his question.
So I think anybody that works in the sector, we're not seeing at all a real reduction in gender-based violence rates, no matter what the noise is saying. And a prime example is we're about to kick off 16 days of activism, and then the noise will be deafening for exactly 16 days, and very little will change on the ground for survivors. So yes, I think that there are really good programs that have been that are rolling out, and we're getting a keener understanding of that. The fact that we're working in silos is not working, that we really should be working on a comprehensive approach that uses all of the role players in the room. And I think we're really getting to a better understanding of how to go about doing that. When it comes to getting the burnout, getting the voice of the survivors out there, obviously there is a need to make sure that when we're having them retell their stories or tell their stories through somebody, that there isn't secondary traumatization. So that might be where you're finding the barriers. But over and above that, if you're working with a woman through all these programs, she will come to a stage where she wants to tell her story. But it's to make sure that she's protected while doing so. So it's not as easy as saying, please tell me your story, because I want to get it out there and into the media so that I can highlight gender-based violence. We need to make sure that when we're doing that, we're doing it sensitively, so we're protecting survivors as well.
Absolutely. And the support that comes now that there are stories out there, and we need to keep making noise. So thank you, Bernard, for the work that you play. Bernardine, thank you so much for that reflection on your work, the success of what you do at the South Department Center. And also to those in the audience that are doing the work in the communities and doing the work in the shelters. We understand that you are sitting at the forefront of these challenges and the roles that you play in our survivors' lives. So Bernardine, I understand that you need to leave shortly, but thank you for your expert insights this morning and your presentation. And we are now going to hand over to Rose. For those that joined late, Rose's bio is very short and sweet. She's the senior social worker at Sahara Shelter and has a Bachelor of Social Work from UNISA. Rose, thank you for being here with us and joining us. And as we unpack this economic empowerment for GBV survivors of South Africa theme this morning, we know that we need to start getting to a point of what steps can be taken, how those noise can become louder, what education, skills, literacy, entrepreneurship interventions can begin to not only from the top down take place, but also starting through the young girl child, a narrative that starts to impact their lives. So Rose, without further ado, over to you. Please pose your questions in the chat, as mentioned, and we look forward to your presentation, Rose.
Thank you, Janine. Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly. Thank you.
Okay, so well done to Bernardine Bacter. That was brilliant, and it's so necessary. Economic empowerment for women is a big thing. GBV, we could help them and gain their confidence, but I think at the end of the day, economic empowerment really plays a big role in their growth as well. So basically, I'm a social worker here, senior social worker at the Sahara Shelter. And my PowerPoint presentation is basically to just let you know what our shelter is doing and some of the skills training that we have implemented that works really well. Can you see my PowerPoint presentation?
Not yet. I'm just checking, Mel. Are you able to load? There we go. It's coming.
Okay. Okay.
Please pose your questions for Rose in the chat so that we can engage a little bit after. Thanks,
Okay.
Rose.
So
You.
I do believe that together we can educate, uplift, empower women to to take a stand against abuse. I loved what Benedine spoke about with regard to the different skills training available, the feedback from different clients with regard to their feelings with regard to the empowerment in their skills. So I will continue. So with the next, where is it? I can't get it. Okay. So we've heard about the stats, they say when you strike a woman, you strike a rock. So we all know, and I think Benedine touched upon the increase in GBV incidents, and it's always increasing every year. I remember at one stage, our president mentioned that the pandemic of the world was COVID. Currently, the pandemic of the world is GBV. So we've had an increase. There's been so many increases in gender-based violence, sexual violences, sexual offenses committed every day. So Sahara Shelter is actually a project of the Phoenix Child Welfare. It is a registered nonprofit organization that visualizes itself as an agency dedicated to the needs and improvement of the quality of life of women and children who are victims of GBV violence, abuse, and assault. So basically, the shelter was brought about as a result of the number of women who went to Phoenix Child Welfare, spoke to social workers of them being physically and emotionally, mentally abused and having no place to go to. So Phoenix Child Welfare then took it upon themselves to start a shelter where women can feel safe and go somewhere. Because we must remember that women, when they are being abused at home, they're very much isolated from their own families and nobody wants to get involved. So the Sahara Shelter really serves a very, very important role in ensuring that women and children feel safe. So we at the shelter provide short-term accommodation for women and children. We are open 24 hours, 7 days a week. We have 3 dedicated house mothers and they provide care support for the women. The admission into the shelter is via Phoenix, the child welfare officers, SAPs, and other organizations. And once the women are admitted to the shelter, they are immediately linked to a social worker. Women are made aware of their rights and they're advised on protection orders and offered additional marital family counsel, as well as they referred to SASA officers, home affairs, and network with different organizations that could help them, and especially legal services as well. You're probably wondering what Sahara means. Well, it is a place of safety. We are called Sahara Shelter, and this is something that I, as a social worker here, have found that our clients are very ashamed to say that they live in a shelter. So I was talking to our director and I said, can we not change shelter to another word? Because, very much I think our shelters are healing centers. So I notice our clients, when they get jobs, find employment, they don't want to say anybody that they're living at the Sahara Shelter. So it is something that we could think about maybe. So this shelter was established in September 1994. The demand for the shelter grew so fast that Sahara launched its new building extension in 2014. It was a special moment for Sahara as it was also National Women's Day. And this function was sponsored by AfriSun. The shelter can now accommodate 22 women and their children.
Rose, I'm just checking if you're frozen.
It looks like we've lost Rose, Janine.
Like
It
we've had a golf day that has been very, very successful. We're currently doing a barnyard show that's been successful. And we also have the Phoenix Fair once a year that brings about much needed funding to the shelter.
Rose, we lost you just before you were speaking about the golf day. So the last we heard you was Sahara funding. If you can recap from that slide again, please.
Okay, sorry about that.
All good.
So basically, in order for us to get the shelter moving and running, we do a lot of fundraising. But our fundraising is always about creating an awareness on GBV as well. So when we had the golf day, which was highly successful, we also created awareness on GBV by submitting pamphlets, letting them know what Sahara stands for and what we do at the center. We also doing a barnyard show, and we have a yearly Phoenix Fair, which is highly, highly successful. These are great source of income and fundraising for our shelter. This is our staff, and that's me, and I'm looking very, 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 very fat in the black and white. Humble, humble apologies. I don't know what else to say about me. I'm trying to lose weight. What do I do? Help. Okay. So this is the launch of phase 2. So this is our new buildings. It was sponsored by AfriSan Sabaya. So these are the clients. Clients and the kids always try to make something just to say that they appreciate staff here at the Sahara. So our 16 days of activism against women and children is a very big thing. It starts on the 25th of November and finishes on the 10th of December. But I can safely say it shouldn't be 16 days. It should be 365 days of activism. And that's what Sahara is all about. Recently, we took all our staff and our survivors and children to the beach. We had a picnic at the park, and we had such a fun-filled day. And the response from the kids was that they've never been to a picnic before. You know, yeah, it was so shocking, when you're in an abusive kind of family, sometimes you just have to stay at home. And this is some of the responses that we had from the kids, and it was really a fun-filled day. So this is our skills training, and I liked what Bernadine spoke about, that the skills training that we offer should be, reasonable, and it should support, I believe, that their talents. So we have women and children that come here, and one of the things that we teach them to do is cooking and baking and roti making. Now, we all know that if you live in the so-called those days Indian areas, roti is a big thing in the community. So a lot of our clients who come from surrounding areas, they like to make rotis and things, and we teach them how to do it, and it is a source of income. So basically, we had one client who was stabbed 10 times. She came in here with 2 children, but her talent was that she was a great speaker. She was a perfectionist in that she kept her room and her clothing and everything absolutely clean and neat. And she had this great talent of cooking. And she used to make the most delicious food with the help of the house mothers as well. Today, it's 2 years that she's left our shelter. She has now opened her own home industry. She is a motivational speaker at many, many organizations where she talks about her journey of being stabbed and being hospitalized. Her home industry is that she cooks, and she's also holding a job. So I like what Bernadine said when, that some of the skills that they do take away with them will increase their confidence further. Oh, and by the way, this this survivor of ours is also taking part for the NSM pageant of survivors. Okay, the next slide. Sorry, there's. Okay, so recently we introduced the skill of crocheting. And it was so amazing, even the kids were learning to do this. What I found is that this was so therapeutic in that it actually helped them to like feel calmer and reduce the stress. I myself tried it for the first time, and I have to admit my stress levels did go down. And unfortunately, it's not my talent to sew and cook, so I don't think I'm going to do that. But our clients and their children as well benefited highly from it. Let's the next slide. So we've had survivors from all over the world. We've had from the UK, from Congo, Lesotho, from all over the place. And we've assisted them in getting back home by talking to the UK embassies. And we've also had refugee moms. Sahara has also taken on victims of flooding, tornadoes, and even during the xenophobia. So Sahara has also assisted in that. So this is garden as therapy. I have to admit that this is my passion, and I find it very, very grounding. The young lady that is sitting there and planting the flowers, she's one of our success stories in that when she came in, police had brought her in after she had attempted to end her life. And she came in very depressed and down, and we got her involved in planting and gardening. She is doing so well now. She's right now in Cape Town. She has a top job running over 7 restaurants. And she still keeps in touch with us. She is our success story. And I do believe that we need to work with each client survivor individually in order to determine what their talents are, what brings them joy in order for them to be successful. And, okay. Bead making is also another project of ours. Oh God, this is not going to talk about bead making. And then we've also got once a month, our youth are invited to a meditation center where they learn yoga and meditation. This also is much needed in terms of them, in terms of their healing. So our youth also attend the RFK camp. It's a retreat where children are meant.
We can register with you here.
No.
Hello.
Apologies, Rose.
Okay. So the RFK camp, it's a retreat where we send our youth, where they are mentored throughout the year. And once a year in October, they go for a camp for 4 days. Kids really, really benefit from this program. All holidays are celebrated at the shelter. We have people coming in and giving talks on the different holidays and the significance and meaning to that. So recently, our ladies and house mothers were invited to CTIA. It's a chef's training and innovation academy. It was a 1-day training on cake making, where we shown how to make the cake. And we also learned how to ice it. We had a talk on how to market it. We had a talk on how to cost the cakes. This skills training was highly, highly enjoyed by everybody. And we all felt a sense of achievement because those cakes that you see there, those are the cakes that we made. Is it not beautiful? So the house mothers playing with the kids. This is our play therapy room. Kids love coming in there, and I find that it's a room that makes them feel very comfortable, and it makes working with kids so much easier. We have children, students who come in and help our kids do with their homework. So these are some of the things that we could do in order that people can do in order to assist in our shelter, volunteer at the time, garden, sponsoring a meal, groceries, toiletries, fundraising supports. These are some of the things that we can do. And then, I just want to say that the challenges here at the shelter, a lot of it, Benedine has spoken about, lack of employment, low salaries, lack of secondary housing. Sometimes staff themselves need to be trained. We also don't have security, and this is so much needed, at the shelters. I love the accredited job skills that Benedine spoke about. We'd like to know more about that. IT skills training. I mean, IT is all over the place. Giving them basic training is not needed. Is needed, but I think we need more than that. And entrepreneurial training, that would be very good. Ladies and gentlemen, I am sorry, but this is the first time that I am presenting. I humbly apologize if I didn't, do so well. I'm nervous. I don't even know if you're hearing me. I can't see you. I feel like I'm talking to the computer. So help, help, help. It was.
You did so well, Rose. Thank you for your bravery this morning. If we expect our women and children in our shelters to be brave, I think we must show them the way, and you definitely show them the way this morning. Thank you for the work that you do at Sahara. I have a question from Bernard, and he says, where do we draw a line between providing shelter for survivors of gender-based violence and operating a victim empowerment organization? That's a big question. Where do we draw a line between providing shelter for survivors of GBV and operating a victim empowerment organization? Would you like to give that question a go?
Janine, what I believe that the shelters play a very, very important role. Remember, the survivors who come here, they come in battered, bruised, destroyed, lack of, don't even believe in God. So the shelters provide a role where a place where they could come in and heal. But more than that, we empower them, we motivate them, we offer them skills training, but I believe more can be done. How nice would it be, although we can offer this basic skills training, but to have an empowerment place where it deals only with the people from the shelter, would say, okay, you know what, we have an accredited skills training. Let's go, there's plumbing. Like, I would love to do plumbing. I like to repair those things. And I believe there must be women plumbers around. But I've spoken to the ladies here and they said they love to do that. But where do we go? We at the shelter cannot do everything. Won't it be nice to create this where they got accredited for something and that they can go out there and be empowered? Because there's a big problem with unemployment.
100%.
Right now, most of our clients are getting jobs because we have networked with call centers. Now they do get paid there, but the money is not enough for them to get a place to rent. We have no secondary housing in KZN. So wow, it would be an excellent idea to create some place where our clients, our survivors can go and be empowered.
Mm. Lucia actually responds as well. She says, providing shelter for survivors of GBV and operating a victim empowerment program often overlap, but distinct goals and strategy define each. And that's what you're saying. Each of them have a goal and a role to play, actually. For example, the primary goal of providing shelter is to ensure immediate safety and protection, very differently to a victim empowerment center that fosters that long-term autonomy and self-sufficiency. And that's what we're speaking about in exactly this woman economic empowerment program and webinar. You know, you highlight what we begin to understand more and more, that there's a broader structural and systemic matter that needs to be addressed here. It's how do we upskill you to become a plumber? So we're still doing bead making, cookie making, cake making. We're still perpetuating those roles of you need to be in the kitchen and you're doing bead work. And there's no, it's phenomenal start, but it needs to be enhanced now. We need to grow them. You know, our girl child needs to know that there's more than cookie making and bead making, that they can dream big, and that there's this magical world out there that gives them the opportunity to climb a corporate ladder or to run a big organization in a big firm and to become that boss woman beyond bead making and sewing and cookie making. And that's what you're speaking about. It's that true education and that true empowerment and that true skills development. And that's the bit that I also want to ask you. So in your cultural Indian community, we know Indian culture, and you know, how are you finding that there's community engagement for the males, for the boy, towards the boy child, to change those narratives and those trajectories of what Indian men have brought upon for the woman in your community?
You know, Janine, when I read that on the was it Benedine's PowerPoint, I looked at it and I say we do as part of Phoenix Child Welfare, but more needs to be done. Because let's face it, we could empower the woman, but we need change to happen on that side, and that's where we are failing. And so I believe that is a very important point that you made. I would like to know, how do we go about, how can we get the men involved, you know, to be part, like we at the shelter, we, as far as possible, we don't allow too many men to come in here. I mean, we need to protect the dignity of our clients and their identity. But the point you made right now, I believe if we can go there, if we can empower, you know, talk to the men out there, wow, I think then only maybe GBV, the stats will come down. Because that is maybe the root cause. We don't know, although we know men are being abused and there's a big demand for shelters for men as well. But yeah, Jenny, something very, very important to think about. We'll have to work on that.
Absolutely. Any of our guests in the audience want to venture with an answer? You're welcome to raise your hand and unmute. And while you're doing that, you know, before we move on from this point, there is one more question in the chat. Would anybody like to lean in to comment and add a voice to this question that we've raised? Nobody? We have a quiet audience today, Rose. Bernard does say most victim empowerment organizations, especially in Limpopo, seem to be controlled by police as they are housed in police buildings. What is the ideal situation here? In most cases, when I try to get information from directors of victim empowerment organizations, directors are not really comfortable to speak to journalists. Can you advise how to navigate around this? Rose, are you able to give some thought there? Anybody in the audience, can you lean in to help us address Bernard's question, particularly in regard to Limpopo and those victim empowerment organizations being controlled by police and being housed in police buildings. Anybody in our audience able to assist with that? Bernard, perhaps we can have somebody just answer you in the chat if nobody wants to unmute now. Yes, Sylvia, I agree. Women are not meant to be the ones to do all the household chores because that's perpetuating the narrative. We are empowered to be engineers and CEOs and so much more. And that's our role here. That's our role as a collective in this movement, in this crisis. You know, it's the time now to start changing narratives, to reach gender equality, to empower our girl children, and most importantly, to help our women become economically empowered. We have a role to play. And so I wish to thank all of you that were present here this morning. Rose, you did well. And you know what? We need to change the narrative about looking fat on pictures and not say those things out loud anymore. It takes bravery and boldness to look at ourselves through the lens of all God's creatures being beautiful and perfect. I want to encourage you to keep using your voices, and I want to encourage you to keep up the good work that you do at Sahara, in your communities, in KZN, in Phoenix. We understand this work not to be easy, but we know that it's impactful and rewarding, and we know that our victims of GBV need us. You know, when we speak of needing to empower women economically, the reverse of that is that women are unempowered economically. The reverse of that is that economic abuse, financial abuse is also a GBV. So beyond the fact that we are disempowered because of lack of skills, education, literacy, etc., we are also disenfranchised through being financially abused and through being economically abused. And those GBV aspects needs to be raised louder and louder and louder. Bernard, thank you for your engagement and your questions. Diane says we can reach out and engage further on that on the chat. Diane being the chairperson of the National Shelter Movement. If there aren't any other questions to be raised, comments to be made, Diane, you're welcome. Please unmute and go ahead, and then Melanie also.
Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody is well, and I hope we're all in the same time zone to use good morning. So I'd wanted to just weigh in around the issue and not specifically around Limpopo, but I do think that when we as a movement don't know what the law and what's in the act, we then have other actors taking over and wanting to take control. Like we already know that a lot of times police don't want to refer women to shelters until you open, a case, which is not what is written in the law. So I really do think we do need to capacitate ourselves to know what does the law say, how do we utilize the law so that, when we have such instances, we're able to tell the police, we're able to say, actually, according to the law, this is what is outlined. I think second to that is, and I think this is why, we have a movement, we have the National Shelter Movement. So, we now know of this particular issue is then to say, how do we as a movement then advocate and empower and educate and raise awareness? Because sometimes it could be that, the people in Limpopo are also not aware of the law. So I think it does create opportunities for us to say, how do we engage further? How do we ensure that our colleagues are also fully aware in terms of where their roles and responsibilities end and where's ours begin? So I think for me, it is an opportunity. I think in terms of some of the other, and I'm going to weigh in on a number of issues, so apologies, I'll take another minute, is, I think when it comes to survivors, I think when survivors are ready to tell their story, they will tell their stories, but we also need the media to report responsibly in terms of the language, the terminology, that is utilized. A lot of times survivors don't want to share their stories because, you give a story and then, even if the article itself is fine, the headline is so sensationalized that, the two don't really correlate. They don't speak to one another. And then people then become fearful. So I do think, there are opportunities for us to say, how do we work better with one another? I think as a movement, we are here to work with the journalists. We are here to work with different stakeholders, and we can see how we can support and we can assist. We have done a number of research that has looked at survivors' experiences, and at times, even if you don't use, a current story, is, one can always, remine and utilize survivor stories where survivors have openly shared, and all of that information is on our website. So please do reach out to us, and we can see how we can facilitate, how we can work, but also how we can share some of the resources that we have, when you want to do stories. Thank you.
Agree. Thank you, Diane. I think, Melanie, you had your hand raised.
I did, but I saw Cindy had us up as well. If she'd like to go first, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Good day, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. Apologies for the background noise. I'm at Wimpy. We don't have electricity for the whole week. We had a massive thunderstorm on Sunday that disrupted everything. But I just wanted to say thank you to our presenters. And we did pick up a lot of things, especially with Bernardine's presentation. Thank you so much, Bernardine, because some of the things that you presented on, I think the shelters that we have this side, we do have programs around that, even those the skills that we are providing are not accredited. So it becomes a bit harder for our survivors to get employment after, even though they have the skills. And also you will find that we have the sewing machines, for them to start manufacturing things, but we don't have people to teach them, like who have those sewing skills, who can provide those that education to our survivors. So that's the challenge that we have currently on our side. But we did pick up a lot, and thank you so much for the presentations. We will be probably contacting you for guidance on how to go about it, because we are also still learning. This is a new environment for most of the people working in the shelters. Some of them never even knew their vocational skills. So we are just taking it step by step. But thank you so much for this presentation. Thank you.
Most welcome, Cindy Swa. Thank you so much for your feedback. Anybody else? Then Mal, I think it's over to you.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the NSM, National Shelter Movement, I'd like to take this opportunity and thank our facilitators and our director, which is Janine today. Thank you so much for an amazing job, even with all our technical issues. Everybody handled it very well, so I thank you for that. I did try my best. Unfortunately, we've also had some really bad weather in Joburg today, so it seems to have thrown us all off a bit. But I'd like to take my hat off to you, ladies. You did great. Rose, definitely hat off to you. I know it is very nerve-wracking on your first time. Even me, up until now, I still stutter along as I do it. But you did a great job. And yeah, upward and forward, as Bernardine always says, we can do it together. And the fight is there. So let's go take it out there, empower our ladies and get them, and to stand on their own and be able to see to themselves and their children and be successful and empowered. So once again, we'd like to thank you, Janine, thank you, Bernardine, and thank you, Rose. We do appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule. And we wish everybody a great day and week ahead. And thanks to all that took the time to attend as well.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.